lot of people don't know, if you've only been watching the This Guy Has Got to Go Vote Common Good podcast on the Facebook feed, is that we have a theme song. Now, if you've already subscribed to the podcast, which we hope you do by going wherever you do podcast subscriptions. Why do they always say that? I mean, of course people know. Like, I don't know.
I don't know. Did you see the big news that Joe Rogan's podcast is going exclusively to Spotify in $100 million deal?
No, but I think the people from Spotify should give me a call because I got a couple ideas if that's the case. Okay. Well, this might be why they're saying, okay, I guess I get it. I guess I've heard of some podcasts that are only on certain applications.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, okay, fair enough. It's not available. Well, this one is available pretty much wherever you get your podcast, including Spotify, where we do not have a deal with Spotify. We would take a deal with Spotify. In fact, we will not negotiate that deal. It's anything you would offer. We'll take it. Hey, Vote Common Good. We do all that we can to try to encourage all people, but especially voters of faith, to do the right thing on November 3rd or before, if you're going to vote early by mail ballot, to stop the reelection of Donald Trump. And on most Wednesdays, Rob and I get together as an act of therapy and public service and ask you to consider this list of reasons why Donald Trump has got to go as the president of the United States. And we have a theme song and a podcast and branding and everything. I think we should start looking at some T-shirts. We'll get Tim on that and get ourselves something together. And just want to thank all of our staff and producers and directors of the Vote Common Good podcast system. Dan Dietrich, our editor and producer. Rob and me. That's it. Just think of us every time other people rattle off all their team of staff, because they're paying all those people. We're I don't even know if we're getting paid anymore. I mean, we're on quarantine, so I don't even know what's happening with our organization, if we're going to be able to get paid. But if you listen to this podcast or you're watching this thing right now, please contribute. $1,000 would be fantastic. If you can do more, please do. We would take a contribution of any size, especially if it includes a comma.
Exactly. Let me ask you this, though, that we are about 2/3 of the way through the month of May in the year 2020. Do you still feel like Donald Trump has got to go as president of the United States?
You know, the only person I think that might agree with me more that Donald Trump has got to go is Donald Trump. Oh. I think the guy is doing everything he can to make sure he is not elected president on November 3rd. It's the only sense I can make out of it. I just, the other option that Donald Trump is doing the best he can, and that he's really trying to put together a re-election campaign with all the work he's doing, he is either incredibly incompetent, which you've argued for years that he is, or he is just a fool at what it takes to win a presidential election. And I think this was true of him actually in 2016. But he won, so right, that's the little hitch in my argument. But I believe with fullest of my heart that this guy has got to go. And as we like to say every week, Rob, if he would call for a national statement tonight and include the phrase, "Therefore, I will resign the presidency as of noon tomorrow," I think we would all applaud the man. I think it would be the one moment where he brings the country together in a salute to him as his greatest act as president is to resign the presidency.
Yep. And you know what that would produce? Unbelievable ratings, bigly ratings, the biggest ratings ever. I mean, he could then brag that, I mean, his resignation as president of the United States got bigger ratings than any other presidential resignation of all time.
Totally.
I don't know what the ratings were for Nixon's, but I would just assume the Trumps would be higher.
There is no doubt that more people watched his resignation in the world. He could get Sean Spicer back. Remember that guy? Who's, by the way, got a podcast and a little brand that he's pitching out there. The Spice has done pretty well. Say what you want about the fools that have been brought into the fool's court around Donald Trump, but all these people, they have all figured out how to make a dime off this guy. They are milking him, including Brad Parscale. I mean, they are just like, this guy is a money train for us. And if he drives this train off the cliff, who cares? We're not true. These are not true believers. There's not a true believer in the crowd. I wanted to know if you want to talk about the D's or the C's today, because your bit about that he's cruel, he's corrupt, and he's incompetent is the highlight of, in my mind, of the why this guy has got to go. A list this week.
Absolutely. Talking about the people that have been on his gravy train, and what they're parlaying it into. I mean, it's an absolutely terrifying thing. Saw a news report today about Sarah Huckabee Sanders, and intimating that she's going to be running for governor of Arkansas. So, yes. as an Arkansan, I'm particularly excited about that.
What makes her think she could be the governor? Just the fact that her father was governor, and that in her world, that you live in a world of nepotism and hand-me-downs.
Exactly.
And I mean, is Sarah Huckabee Sanders, again, why would I even say this, qualified to be the governor of Arkansas? Because clearly someone can win a seat without being qualified. But is there something about her pedigree? I mean, I know that for a short stint, she was a press secretary for a president, but
that
is there something
seems
else
to be the the biggest thing on her resume, is that she was a press secretary for a cruel, corrupt, and incompetent president, and went out daily to lie on his behalf. It is. Listen, I mean, this is a whole different subject, but all across the country, there are the Republicans instituted many years ago now, probably 20 to 30 years ago, a very concerted effort to take over state houses throughout the country. And there's a recognition that there's a lot of power that state legislatures have, and that having state legislatures under your control gives you the opportunity to enact tremendous amount of policy, and then to produce the kind of lawsuits that can change policy nationwide by a state enacting a law that gets challenged and eventually goes to the Supreme Court. And then, so there's a little bit of, conservative social engineering, and it's been a concerted effort on the part of the Republicans. And so all across the country, Republicans control state houses, and really have left Democrats, in the dust in a number of states. Arkansas is one of those states. The Arkansas state legislature is the hotbed, is the laboratory for the most terrifying of the religious right conservative agenda. It's the place where all of that stuff gets worked out. And if you are the religious nut who wants to get into politics, you run for state rep or you run for state senator, and they are, and here's the thing, we have a relatively, by modern standards, a relatively moderate Republican governor in Asa Hutchinson here in Arkansas, who I think what he has been really good about is him being he's conservative, yes, but his tone is much different, and I think he's been able to restrain the most extreme impulses of our legislature. And the thing that terrifies me about Sarah Huckabee Sanders is that she won't do that.
She has no interest in that. That's why she's running.
Yeah. And it's what scares me is not that Sarah Huckabee Sanders is going to be running the state, though that scares me. It's that the religious right nut jobs in our legislature are going to be running the state because she's because she gets.
Well, and people should know that you saying this as someone who has run for office in Arkansas, not for the state, at state level. You're a guy who knows, and as a Republican, you ran. You know what that world is like. You're deeply embedded. You're not outside shouting at what's going on inside the house. You got a bedroom
Yeah,
house.
it's terrifying. So I think we're probably what, a year away from starting a "This Gal Has Got to Go" podcast to talk about Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders' work.
This galley. Hey, why is she running against Asa Hutchinson? Is he term limited?
He'll be term limited. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So just gonna hand it over to him. That's gonna be the plan, right? It's just gonna be she's just gonna walk in and take it off his hands. Doesn't have to worry about it anymore. All right. Well, you got a list of things on our list of why Donald Trump has got to go.
I mean, can we start with the hydrochloroquine?
Sure. I got a couple audio pieces. You know, I watch my television and then get up and wander around and yell at myself late at night and then rewind and then record the audio.
All right. So the president, I mean, in case you are on a social media fast right now, which I would highly recommend for anybody. If you didn't see the news, the president claimed in a kind of impromptu, kind of off the cuff, did not seem to be prepared or planned statement. The president claimed that he is now taking hydrochloroquine, the drug that the malaria drug that he has been touting since the beginning of this crisis. There was some reporting that, and I had speculated that he had some financial interest in the company that makes this drug. Turns out that he does, but it's very, very minor. Maybe less than $1,000 worth of stock. So I mean, it's not a significant thing. And I posted
probably
an
apology.
Probably, and I posted an apology on my Facebook page for posting an article that turned out not to be completely accurate.
I did not because it doesn't matter to me if it's $1,000 or anything else.
Yeah, I did have a libertarian friend who was just hammering me, and so I tried to demonstrate that when you post something that turns out not to be true,
not as accurate,
you can say, listen, this is not actually true, and I'm sorry I posted it. Not a problem.
Well, hey, anytime you can make a libertarian happy, you just run right down that road, because I've found those people are quick to forgive, easy to see a reasonable opinion, and tend to move on. I mean, they can't get over the Civil War when we had a choice about this, and the Revolutionary War, where we decided that libertarian is not the federal government, state government, local government structure of this country, and these people won't quit. I mean, we could do a libertarian. Liberate us from the libertarians thing sometime. I have I put up with, I think, a wide range of political views, because I really do think that every political view has a point. It's just the point that the libertarians have is one that has been decided in two of our greatest wars internal to this country. And they are settled matters, and we have moved on. Yeah.
Well, as a person who voted for Gary Johnson, for a variety of reasons. I actually have watched a couple of libertarian presidential conventions. And I was amazed. I think it was the 2012 one that I was watching, where there was a spirited and sincere debate during their presidential convention about the legitimacy of states issuing driver's licenses.
Yes.
And I felt like, wow, at least the Libertarian Party is tackling the hard-hitting problems, the biggest problems we face as a country. They're, trying to solve those things. We are down rabbit holes today. Listen, we have stuff to talk about with Donald Trump.
We do.
Here we're talking about libertarians and Sarah Huckabee Sanders.
But it spills over. So this is why he's got to go, though. This is why he's got to go, because it just fuels. We wouldn't have to be talking about the daughter of the former governor running for governor in Arkansas. We wouldn't have to be talking about the continued rise of libertarians. The Tea Party should have been the end of those folks. And look, the only reason Gary Johnson and crowd ran as libertarians is because it was the cattle car they could get on, because all the other third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth parties in this country, because we don't just have a two-party system. We have many political parties. They just have very little support. The Constitutionalist Party, the Marijuana Party, the Alligator Party, all these different parties. If any of those had been viable, Gary Johnson would have jumped on those. All these people that are sort of candidates for libertarianism, Justin Amash or any of the others, they're doing that because they think there's enough of an apparatus there that they could hijack, not because they're true libertarians. Anyway, we'll do a whole subset on why the libertarians have to go.
The idea of libertarians having apparatus is kind of funny as well.
Laughable.
So listen, Donald Trump claims that he is taking this malaria drug.
Yeah.
Okay. So first of all, do you believe he's actually taking it?
Well, I'm conflicted about it because you did text me that there's no chance Donald Trump is taking that. Like just randomly out of nowhere, I get a text from Rob that just says there's no chance Donald Trump is taking that drug. I mean, he is not doing it. I would love to see the pharmacy, whether it's I don't even know where the president gets his drugs, any drug that he's on, where he gets that filled. I mean, I know he's got a White House doctor. The White House doctor's note of, hey, we talked about it, didn't really say I wrote him a prescription. I don't know to whom the doctor writes or to whom the prescription a doctor writes is delivered for the president to get his medication. Pretty easy to check. One might find out.
I mean, does the president just stroll into the CVS on the corner, in downtown Washington, D.C., and stand there? You got to show
up with an ID somewhere and be like, "Hey, I'm picking up for my."
That little CVS waiting room that has two chairs in it. Is
what
he
do
just
you think,
by the bathrooms? Is he sitting there waiting?
What do you think the chances are after Melania finishes the dishes? She runs over and picks up his prescriptions, because I say that if you don't know, because Donald Trump made a comment, which we might get to later, about why Mike Pompeo should not be doing his own dishes by using the statement, well, what, just because his wife or kids aren't home, he should be doing the dishes? I don't want the Secretary of State doing dishes. And the idea that just from his essence is that the only reason a man would be doing dishes and have to have his government-funded employee do his personal dishes is because his wife wasn't available. Unbelievable, this guy. No. So do I think he's taking it? I think he probably started taking it just so he could say he took it. No, look, here's what I think's going on with
before or after this statement. He's taking it now.
Yeah, I think that weekend, or that Sunday night. I think Laura Ingraham, I think she snuggled in a little packet because she's the one pushed this whole thing on him.
She got the trial pack.
She walked it in. She like hit up some poor lupus patient and said, "Hey, can you give me a little taste?"
Or just stalking a farmer rep, who's like, who's got a trunk full because doctors' offices are closed and they can't go out and sell it. So
he's like, "I got this malaria medication, don't know what to do with it, but if we could start a market." Well, she's the one that pitched this whole idea to him. And here's what I think happened. 60 Minutes on Sunday apparently did a story about why Trump is pitching this hydrochloroquine, made fun of him. So it's not just out of nowhere that Donald Trump brought this up on Monday. And the reason he said in the press conference, don't have the audio, but you have to trust me somewhere in my memory. And I knew all your eyes would light up when I say this. He was seething because he was made fun of by a news story that he took it as him being made fun of by a news story on 60 Minutes, which he obsesses about what's on 60 Minutes, and wanted then
because he's in his 70s,
which I understand because I watch it too. Fight that battle. He wanted to fight that battle with 60 Minutes and bring it back up. So to the rest of us who are thinking, why is he bringing this up right now and raising this? It's because he couldn't sleep Sunday night. He was so mad about that. So he devised a little devilish plan to bring it back up and say, I'm taking it. And then to just fictitiously say many medical professionals, all of us on the front lines, we're all taking it. So he will not get over the fact that he's been made fun of by lights in your body and putting disinfectant into your lungs and this hydrochloroquine thing. He just will not let it go because he knows it's made him look like a fool, and he will fight that thing until the last day. So I think Sunday night, he started taking it. That he's like, you know what? I'm just going to take it. Because even his answer, like, I take one a day. Like, your Viagra pill you're talking about, you take one a day? He's not clear at all about what he's taking, this guy.
Yeah.
What
Listen, we have noted, we have observed that Donald Trump lies about things that he doesn't need to lie about.
Yes.
He just gets caught up in the moment and starts exaggerating and ends up lying. And I mean, classic examples, we were at an event in New Hampshire in an arena that's held 12,000 people that was pretty full, probably had 11,000 people in it. And the next day, Donald Trump said that the event that he was at in New Hampshire had 40 to 50,000 people at it. The building literally holds 12,000 people. And we were two of the people in the room. Don, it's
just not that big. It's just not that big, Don. You couldn't have that many people in there.
He lies about things he doesn't need to lie about.
Totes.
And I think this is one of those examples. He does not need to lie about this.
No.
He just gets caught. He just gets caught up. And I think, what he does is he begins by talking about how many people on the front lines are taking it. And then all of a sudden, I think you just see him, like, he finds himself saying the words, and I'm taking it too. Like, he did not plan to say that. To me, it felt like, and I totally understand your take on it's a response to the 60 Minutes thing, but and maybe that was why it was in his head, but he just has this tendency to ramp things up and to exaggerate because he's
and why he spends any of our time again in this pandemic. And this is where his absurdity is dangerous. We're in a pandemic.
Yeah.
95,000 people will have died by the time people listen to this podcast. It's going to be 150,000 or more before August. And what is this man doing? First of all, holding a press conference about nothing, and then talking about himself because he wants to either defend his ridiculous statements in the past, or he's trying to say to people, no, our government does have an option for you that keeps the coronavirus away, because he down talks this coronavirus's lethality all the time. He's constantly trying to say, it's not that bad. We've done everything we need to do. You're all going to be okay, because he's the cheerleader, not the player in this game. Okay, can I play this audio? Did you hear the audio when the reporter yesterday said to him, your own FDA said, do not take hydrochloroquine because it's dangerous. And then he responds with this. So it's unbelievable. If anybody's watching, if you're watching this on Facebook, you know that I'm playing it out of my phone into my microphone. Not very loudly, though. Hang on a minute. Every app you use.
Hydroxychloroquine should not be used outside of a hospital setting or...
No, that's not what I was told. No, there was a false study done where they gave it to very sick people, extremely sick people that were ready to die. It was given by obviously not friends of the administration. And the study came out. The people were ready to die. Everybody was all...
So he goes on to say, no. The FDA, that was a false study that the FDA used to make the recommendation. It was done by the VA. And he says they just gave it to a whole bunch of super sick people. And then those people died by a study done by people, quote, clearly not friends of the administration. So now he believes science is not only useless, maybe we don't even know if we need testing, but the studies that are coming out from the VA of the federal government, distributed to the people by the Federal Drug Administration under his purview, was done specifically by people not friends of the administration to say don't use hydrochloroquine. Why does Donald Trump feel like saying something about not using this drug would be an attack on the administration. Why has he hooked the administration to this drug? This is the crazy mind of this man, where not only is everything seen in relationship to him, but it doesn't even make sense that the administration has a bet on hydrochloroquine, or that the federal government is working against the president of the United States to not have people in this country take a drug that would clearly work. So why does he believe that this conspiracy runs so deep that people would say, don't take a drug that clearly would help people, and they're going to do it just to hurt his administration? This is a level of paranoia spoken in public. He's not caught on tape wandering around the White House, like, speaking silently to and quietly to a friend about, I'm not sure that study wasn't sort of leaked to make us look bad. This is his response to a reporter who says the FDA said don't take it, and says, no, that's not what I heard. What I heard was conspiracy theory. It's nothing but conspiracy theories with this guy.
And
he's got to go.
He is projecting. He is assuming that everybody else functions in the world the way he functions in the world. And what he does is about helping his friends and hurting his enemies. And he assumes that everybody else is acting that way, including doctors at the VA, doctors at the FDA, that they are not friends of the administration, and therefore they would do something that would hurt the administration. He is projecting because that's how he operates in the world. And he is assuming that everybody else does. And it is utterly ridiculous, and in fact is putting American lives in jeopardy. He's got to go.
This is what I heard. John Heilman, one of the commentators, Showtime and on MSNBC, he has a little saying that is, everything Donald Trump says is either confession or projection. He's doing one of the two all the time when he does this stuff. So just run it through that rubric, and you'll come up with the answer about what this guy is or is not doing.
So speaking of people trying to examine and understand Donald Trump and how he speaks and what he's trying to accomplish, did you see this news report about this couple of gentlemen, someone in Virginia who worked with a scientist with a PhD, frankly, built an artificial intelligence bot that would go back and examine 11 million words the president has said since 1976. So it's not recent, but like all of his public, spoken word, to analyze patterns in his speech, to be able to tell when is he lying and when is he angry, to be able to understand, his patterns, to be able to use artificial intelligence to do that. That there's just some random guy in Virginia working on this is like, I just love that. And then B, that he had to get like a PhD, to help him, it's just kind of crazy. But what was fascinating about this story is that in examining these 11 million words that the president has said publicly since 1976, the artificial intelligence bot could not make sense of them until they disabled the programming in the artificial intelligence bot, which uses correct English grammar.
Wow. So they had to say, drop all the half sentences, all the sort of misstatements, and only look at what they intended to say. And they couldn't figure out Donald Trump's speech pattern by having English grammar rules in place.
Exactly. Like all of that stuff, like diagramming sentences, if you remember doing that up on the board in eighth grade, and all of that stuff, all of these rules of English grammar that we've all learned and utilized to some, success or otherwise, they had to disable the ability of the bot to analyze words and sentences based on English grammar to be able to understand Donald Trump.
God bless him. I mean,
this guy's got to go.
He is just the most incompetent leader I have ever been around. Like, truly, it is getting worse and worse by the day.
Here is this tremendously infuriating article in which Eric Trump, the president's son, says that COVID-19 is going to just magically disappear after Election Day.
Yeah, because he's convinced the only reason this has come out, the reason governors are doing what they're doing, the reason every country in the world is shutting down their economies is because they want to hurt this president.
They want to make it difficult for Donald Trump to get reelected. And, as soon as as soon as he's not reelected, poof, everything's going to be back to normal.
It'll all go away. Well, look, I mean, what president wouldn't say, I'm willing to do that? Like, wouldn't you say if somehow I can keep a million people from being infected or dying from this disease, if I'm just not the president, do that. If that's the point, become the great American hero. Talk to your father, Eric. Talk to him and say, resign the presidency tomorrow morning and the economy will open and all of this will go away and you will forever receive the credit. Just resign and it will all magically go away because it's nothing but a big ruse to try to take you down. So do the great thing. Cut your presidency short by 7 months or by 4 years and 7 months, but you will be the most revered political figure in American history. Look what you did for the country. Go ahead and do it if that's what this is. I mean, these people's, their total lack of respect for their own followers is incredible. That they think people are going to buy this. Now, I think his numbers are collapsing. I think he's in more trouble than he's ever been in. I think people are just like, this is just a total cluster, and this guy has got to go. And they're now just covering their bases as to the excuse that they can then make.
It's really fascinating. It's really fascinating to me, though, the partisan divide, during the crisis. I mean. Eric Trump says this thing that reveals a very cynical view that, Democrats are utilizing the COVID-19 crisis as a political wedge to use against the president, revealing that, in fact, that's exactly what the Trump administration and their campaign is planning on doing. But that has trickled down and been passed on to, their everyday Americans. I mean, I was grocery shopping yesterday, and I said to Vanessa when we got done, because we were talking about the people that we saw that were not wearing masks, and I said to her, I assume every person that I see who's not wearing a mask voted for Donald Trump.
Wow.
I mean, that's just when my eyes land on that person, I just assume, well, it's a Trump voter. Because they don't have a mask on. I assume that
they already had the coronavirus and now they know that they're no longer a carrier and they're highly confident that they're not infectious and they wanted to save the masks for someone else in a selfless act. But you could be more right, actually. Yeah, no, it is. He has managed to then make, I mean, again, why the guy has got to go, because he's fighting his own government and literally his own team's statements regularly by saying, I'm not going to wear a mask, but masks are really an important part of our response system. And we'll make sure there's enough masks, but I'm not going to be wearing one. He said it just about going, he's going to go to, apparently he's going to go to Michigan or somewhere and go to a plant where they're making ventilators. And there's a requirement that everyone wears a mask. And he said, I don't know. I'm not going to wear. Might wear goggles, the goggles and not the mask. Like you're worried about catching a piece of flying debris in your eye, but you're not going to wear a mask because you're pretty sure at one moment that you don't have the virus, but at the next moment you have to take hydrochloroquine because you're on the front lines. Which is it? Yeah. Who's taking that medication as a precaution, which you're advised to never, ever do? Who's taking it as a precaution and then says, but I don't have anything to worry about. I don't have to wear a mask. Like that is just, he's unbelievable. Did you see the thing about testing where he said that it's a badge of honor that we have more cases in this country? unreal. So first of all, the fact that the man just simply continues to say things that make it sound as if he does not understand that what a test does is confirms that someone has the disease, or as he says, the disease, or whatever you want to call it. Here's the thing. In this country, the only way you can get a test is if you have shown symptoms. It's not as if we went around and tested 300 million people and then came back with a big number and said, wow, a bunch of people didn't even know they had it, and that's why our numbers are higher. If other countries were doing the same thing, that would happen. No, we're testing people who have shown that they need to be tested.
Yep.
So the fact that you get a test means that you have a very high likelihood that you have the disease, or whatever you want to call it.
Yep. The
idea that it's a badge of honor that we have a big number of confirmed cases, it does not say that we're testing enough. It says so many people have the conditions that would require you to have a test because we don't have enough tests. It's exactly the opposite. And I'll play the audio for you in a minute.
The state of Arkansas, let me brag on us for a minute. We are in the midst of reopening, and restaurants and churches and everything is getting back to normal. And earlier this week, we had a significant uptick in new coronavirus cases. I was actually getting some numbers. I think it was Monday. It came back the number of tests. There were 115 tests that had been conducted, previously, and 115 positive cases.
Perfect score. Way to go, Arkansas.
Perfect score. Badge of honor.
Badge of honor.
But it just shows that that people don't get the coronavirus because they take the test.
No,
they take the test because they have the symptoms of the coronavirus.
Right.
How does he not understand this?
It's like saying a pregnancy test. Don't take a pregnancy test if you don't want to get pregnant. That's not how it works. People don't take pregnancy tests to get pregnant. They take pregnancy tests to confirm if they are in enough time where they can start to respond to that. The same thing with any diagnostic test. It doesn't give you. Okay, so here it is. Here's the audio bit of him saying this utter incomplete nonsense.
So if you're testing 14 million people, you're going to find many more cases. Many of these people aren't very sick, but they still go down as a case. So actually the number of cases, and we're also a much bigger country than most. So when we have a lot of cases, I don't look at that as a bad thing. I look at that as, in a certain respect, as being a good thing because it means our testing is much better. So if we were testing 1 million people instead of 14 million people, we would have far fewer cases, right? So I view it as a badge of honor. Really, it's a badge of honor. It's a great tribute to the testing and all of the work that a lot of professionals have done. Okay?
The reason we have so many cases is just because we're so good at testing. I mean, it just defies, right? Well, if we're so good at testing and we didn't have a lot of infected people, then we would be able to say we have all these negative tests. We wouldn't say we have all these positive tests. The idea that you tested a lot and not nearly enough, not even by any standard a lot, could we just say 14 million is a teeny number? I should have pulled up statistics on this, but I forgot. Pick a product. Pick a frigging product and run it through the rubric of, is 14 million very many? Like scones sold at Starbucks, 14 million, not even a number you would consider being enough. It is such a small, pathetically small number in a country of 300 plus million people. 300 million. 14 million tested is a teeny number. Like the number of toilet paper rolls sold in a week, it probably pushes 14 million. I mean, 14 million, it can sound like a big number. Somebody's like, well, that's more than 10, but it's nothing compared to 300 million. And the fact that 14 million people have qualified for having that test done in this country tells us that this thing is all over this country. And by the way, yes, we are bigger than some countries, the third largest country in population in the world. But do you know who we're not larger than? China. China has 1.5 billion.
They lied about their numbers anyway.
Sure they did. And I'm sure we're not. You know who else we're not larger than? India. Yeah. 1.3 billion. And then Indonesia's at 273 million, Pakistan at 220 million, Brazil at 212 million, Nigeria at 206 million. Sure, we're at 330 million. But are those other countries anywhere close to this number? It's not because we're a large country. It's because this virus has run rampant in this country and not in others. Why did that happen? Delays, denials, and dithering that continue to this very day. The only thing that will change for this country when it comes to this virus is when this presidential administration is gone. Now, I know I have never come to that conclusion before this week, but I have now concluded there's nothing on the horizon that is changing between now and a year from now because we're not getting a vaccine. This thing's going to continue to run. The only change will be, will the federal government respond in any way differently than what the federal government has responded so far? And apparently the only way to make that happen is for this guy to go.
Yeah. Can we talk a minute about the undermining of the numbers even while he's trying to report them? Other cases weren't that bad. Like he's even trying to minimize because he understands, he knows that the 90,000, once we hit 100,000 deaths, those numbers, he's concerned about numbers, ratings and approval numbers. But though, like the numbers of people infected with this disease, the number of people who are dying from this disease, those are the numbers that are really going to register, that are really going to matter with the American people, because those numbers represent friends and family and loved ones and like human beings that are far more important than like TV ratings. So listen, he understands that those numbers are really going to make an impact. And so he's undermining them even while he's talking about them. And it's the same thing. We've seen these, like we've seen, like there's out there in the zeitgeist, there's this sense that like the number of deaths really shouldn't even be that high, because the people didn't really die of coronavirus. They maybe had coronavirus, but they really died of something else. Yeah. And so like in both cases, whether it's confirmed cases or deaths related to coronavirus, he's trying to undermine those numbers, minimize those numbers, to say that, so that people think, well, we can't really trust those numbers.
Totally.
And
what he's doing.
It is purely self-protective.
And look, and there's a point to be made on that, right? I saw this nice little bit on the 11th hour last night about John Glenn's wife, the famous astronaut, and she died of coronavirus.
And Senator from Ohio.
She was 100 years old.
Yeah,
I get it. Lots of older people. In Minnesota, we've had 757 deaths. A great number of those are people in care facilities. Now, why are people in care facilities getting this disease? They're really not traveling around much. They're not out and about. Why are they getting it? Why is it so dangerous for them? So if what the president wants to make as his argument is, hey, this is kind of the thing that pushes old people over the edge, but not that many really. Or as he said it about the test the VA did on hydrochloroquine. They gave it to really old people and really sick people. Oh, is that part of the campaign pitch? Vote for Donald Trump. Don't really care about the really old people and the really sick people. The one thing the federal government has as its responsibility is everyone, including the old people and sick people.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Who had a campaign pitch about getting rid of the people we didn't need anymore? People that are non-productive, people that are just, a burden on society.
I can think back to sort of Europe and Germany in the 20s and 30s.
Speaking of campaigns, can I I want to share a voicemail that somebody sent me on Facebook and gave me permission to share. He lives in the state of Maine, and he received this voicemail. It was a voice to text from the Maine Republican Party, the state of Maine. The Maine GOP sent this to him, and this is what it says. Hi. This is Melissa. I'm calling to give you an important update on President Trump's response to COVID-19 and how it saved American lives despite Beijing Biden's attempts to rewrite history and downplay China's role in the coronavirus pandemic. President Trump's decision to restrict travel to and from China on January 31st, 2020, saved millions of lives. Beijing Biden accused President Trump of hysteria, xenophobia, and fear-mongering before finally agreeing with President Trump's decision in April. Beijing Biden's son Hunter signed a $1.5 billion deal with a Chinese investment fund and made $80,000 per month from China in the months leading up to the coronavirus outbreak. President Trump is the right person to lead us through the coronavirus pandemic, and his first priority is the health and safety of the American people, not his family's pocketbook. This call was paid for by the Maine Republican Party, not authorized by any candidate or candidate committee.
The idea that what they're worried about in Maine is shoring up the base, where they can use insider language like a nickname for Biden. And anybody who ever mentions Hunter Biden, they are already so deep into a subculture. The majority of people have no idea who Hunter Biden is, no matter, I know, and we're deep in the subculture. Unbelievable that they're still having to fight for those people in Maine.
Yep. So this is fascinating for a number of reasons. One, I think it gives us a little window into what the president's playbook is going to be. Beijing Biden, come on, that's a new nickname. That's not Sleepy Joe.
Yeah.
That's going to be interesting. The Hunter Biden thing is that's a story that is not going to go away.
I agree with you. I think it's not going to go away, but it's only going to land on people who already know the subtext. It's a base play, full-on base play.
The audacity of this president and to suggest that his first and only priority is the health and safety of the American people, not his family's pocketbook. The hypocrisy is breathtaking, not his family's pocketbook. This is a president who tweets about his golf courses and requires foreign dignitaries to stay at his hotels and stays at his own hotels, requiring the Secret Service to pay, his hotels millions of dollars. It is breathtaking, the hypocrisy.
Yes. The corruption of this presidency and this criminal family that has been involved in criminal activity, and they have civil lawsuits and criminal lawsuits and criminal pen. And as I've said before, I got a conspiracy theory of my own, which is going to prove to be true someday, that big fish is being pushed on people. Secondly, that there is a sealed indictment against the president and against members of his family that came out of the Mueller investigation that will have to be dealt with at some point in this country. The legal liability that faces these people, to borrow that Heilman quote, it's either confession or projection. That was a confession voicemail that they left. These are all the things. Donald Trump did all those things about China. Donald Trump's own children are profiting. Ivanka personally profits in her design firm, clothing design firm, because of the policies of the United States in China. Literally on the same trip when she goes there for some reason, working for her dad, she's also working on her own, getting her own fashion line going. Their corruption sees literally no end. And the idea that Joe Biden, this is why the guy's got to go, because he poisons everything, including, this will be my last point for the day, including all the other presidents. He's now given up on doing an unveiling ceremony for Obama's portrait, which is something that they do after a president's been a president. They do a presidential portrait, and then they unveil it. And could I just say, why in the world does it take 3 years to do a portrait of a guy? The guy was president for 12 years. Couldn't get a running start on that portrait?
Eight.
Oh, for 8 years. It's been 12. I was going to say it's been 12 years since the guy was elected president.
Yeah.
He was president for 8 years. They couldn't get a running start on getting that thing done. Like, why do these things take so long? Yeah. Not really the point. The point being that Donald Trump was asked if he would reach out to any of the other presidents to ask them for their input, the 4 living presidents for their input on this pandemic. He said, absolutely not. He has poisoned this, what I think is sort of a silly and childish elite club of 5.
Yes, but it is symbolic. It is symbolic of the fact that we have a peaceful transfer of power in our country.
Yes.
It is, and it is symbolic of that, and that is something that's important. That's something that, frankly, distinguishes our country in our 200 plus year history, compared to a lot of countries in the world over the past 200 years, that we have had the peaceful transfer of power. And yeah, it might be silly that our presidents get together and they do this stuff, and there's, but it's symbolic of who we are as a people. Like
most symbolism, it's a little silly when you look at it as its own, but that's important. There's a lot of good symbolism. Symbolism matters. We have a symbolic narrative in our country. Well, here's the other thing the guy has done. He's running a one-man show, right? Just all him.
It is.
But he is, because of the one-man shit show that is the Trump presidency, now we're going to have to put explicit. He has depleted the federal government's resources. People have quit, been fired, or through attrition have moved to other departments and not been refilled. And they're now discovering, and the reporting is going to come out significant on this, that's why the federal government's response was so dithering for 6 months of this coronavirus, because the people and the systems literally don't exist. Because Donald Trump has chosen to gut that whole part of the system, calling that the swamp and calling Mike Pompeo a great American hero, a guy who is using his own position as Secretary of State to try to run for some other office, probably the presidency in 2024. I mean, the corruption just touches every person surrounded by this, surrounding this president, because it's just the stench of a campfire. It's the smoke of a campfire getting all over all of these people, and they can only stay there so long that as they want that stench on them, and they've just all sold out to such an unbelievable level.
Yeah. A little over a year, or it was about a year ago, I had a phone call with a congressional candidate in New York City named Mel Gagarin. And Mel said something that at that point I had never thought of or, had heard anybody talk about. And Mel said that in his mind, the untold story of the Trump presidency is how he has completely gutted civil servants. That throughout, we can talk in kind of with negative connotations about like the bureaucracy but what Mel said, and Mel worked in Washington, D.C. for the federal government before returning to New York to run for Congress. He said, listen, what has happened over the last couple of years is that civil servants who have spent their lives working for the federal government want nothing to do with this president and have retired, have switched fields. They have not been replaced. And essentially, what Mel was saying is that the next president is going to have to essentially rebuild the federal government, the administrative branch of the federal government, because it has been completely gutted by this president. And Mel is running for Congress because he's worried about the risk that puts, working families, people of color, poor families, like the people at the margins, people whose lives are at risk. It puts them at greater risk because we cannot follow through. And like, how many people have not yet received their stimulus checks? There's a lot of people out there that haven't received their stimulus checks because the federal government is like, it's not that it is incompetent, it's that it's understaffed and unable to perform its basic functions because the president wants it to be all about him. I think there's two things at play. I think there's ideological conservatives who don't trust the federal government and intentionally want to undermine its ability to do its work. But then I also think there is this one-man show that like this president wants it to be all about him. He doesn't trust other people to do the work. He only trusts his family and his son-in-law and a few people around him. And that incompetence is costing Americans lives. It's not
Totally.
like we are not talking in some, theoretical, like, let's debate political philosophy and ideology kind of thing. We are talking about the lives of human beings that are being lost because this president cares more about himself than anything else.
Yes, and he is yeah, look, and I know there's all this push on the government and federal government, but for the most part, governmental systems exist because someone saw them as valuable at some point. And for the great most part, that value has been to help people.
Mm-hmm.
This is the first divide, when you walk into the foyer, which hallway you go down. Is it, well, all this government exists because somebody's going to benefit from it for themselves and someone's ripping you off, or all of this exists because someone thought this was to benefit someone else. Now, I know it's not always that pure, but I think it's a question that the two hallways to go down require you to make a choice. Then when you go down that hallway, you can say, hey, not every room in this hallway is for people's benefit, or not every room in this hallway is only to exploit people. So either way, you can end up with a government that helps. But the fundamental question of, does our government exist to benefit people, or does it only exist to benefit those who are trying to extract because power only wants to benefit itself? This becomes the fundamental question of this government. And Donald Trump, the reason he's got to go as president, in my view, is because he has chosen that it only exists to benefit those who are in power. And that's what he's doing. He's just simply operating as a guy who says, this is how it works. He promised it on the campaign trail. He's living it out now. I know how it works, and I'm the best one to fix it.
Yep.
Well, yeah, if you believe that's what the federal government is just a big rigged system to benefit someone other than you for their own benefits at your expense. If that's what you believe it is. And look, Donald Trump's not the only one. Conservatives and libertarians aren't the only ones who believe that stuff. There's people on the progressive side that will argue it all day long. But if you believe that the federal government exists in its core to be sure to preserve the rights and preserve the liberty and to preserve the life of people that need the protection and need the assistance, then you come down on a very different place.
Yep.
End of political sermon.
We have talked for nearly an hour, and we have not talked about inspector generals being fired.
Totally.
We have not talked about criminal cases being interfered with by the attorney general. We have not talked about.
That's true. Yes. I lost track of that in my ranting and raving. The
president tweeting about vote by mail in Michigan and lying about what was happening there. I mean, we have not talked about Obamagate and his obsession with trying to create a crisis and a scandal where there is none.
Yeah, it's just we got plenty for because it could be that next week we won't have a new list of things that Donald Trump has said and done.
Zero chances of that.
We could just carry that over from this week, and we probably should, because this inspectors general firing all these people that he's been firing, 5 of them or something. It's unbelievable. Now, look, the president has a right to have a person in positions that the president trusts. The fact that the president doesn't trust a person because they're moving against his Secretary of State, that's not a legitimate reason to not trust the person. No one's saying you don't have a right to have someone you trust. What we're saying is you don't have the right to not trust that person for doing his job. That's the problem. And that's what's wrong with this guy day in and day out, is when someone does their job and it doesn't benefit him, then he says, I've lost confidence. And that's got to be the argument for his defeat on November 3rd, day in and day out. He does the job totally back-asswards.
He's got to go.
This guy has got to go, as Vince Anderson likes to say.
He's got to go.
Thanks for putting up with us, if you have. And hey, go to voteCommonGood.com and kick in a little. $5, $10, $15, $20,000. Any of that would be fine. Love to have you.